Hey guys, what's up? This is Falsebooles123 and this is day 32 of my quarantine vlogging challenge. So I actually just got a text from my chef like yesterday, and he says like, "Hey yo, we're gonna be having a health inspection in May, even though we haven't had hardly any customers for like 2 months." And so he actually is gonna have us come down and do some deep cleaning, and that's gonna be nice just because I'll get some hours. And so hopefully this quarantine is going to be ending soon. If it doesn't, I'm going to keep vlogging. I am determined to do it for, the entire amount of time that we're quarantined, just because I want to make too much content for, all of my, I have 9 subscribers now, but you can be lucky number 10 if you want to be. Don't worry. Anyway, so today I am doing, and it's a little earlier in the week than I usually do this vlog, but this is my weekly music corner. Now, for the people that don't know, I like to do basically just either as a segment for one of my weekly vlogs or as some of the daily vlogs that I've been doing. I like to have a little time where we just sit down, and I'll usually pick like 3 albums that I'll listen to, and I just talk about them. I talk about the genre and how I enjoy the music, and I'll give like a few suggestions for other bands that are similar to them, and we just have a little bit of fun. Also, in case you're wondering, reason why I look like a whore is mostly just because I found a pair of my acid washed, I don't even think these are acid washed, I think these are just faded gray denim shorts, and I was going for a cute little beach look. This doesn't work mostly just because you can only ever see the top half of me in any of my videos, so it mostly looks like I just forgot to get dressed today. But I'm okay with that. So Ryan, what is today's topic for our music corner? Well, let me tell you. Basically, I was thinking about the 80s, like I do, and I'm thinking, I haven't listened to too much music from the 80s. Yeah, when I was a kid, I listened to Pat Benatar, I would listen to Cyndi Lauper, of course I'd be listening to some Duran Duran, but, besides all that, basic 80s stuff, I wasn't super, into, the classics, what the cool kids were listening to. Also, apparently I just had some sort of fever dream about Bandersnatch, even though I haven't seen that in over a year. And I'm just I want to know what the Thompson Twins are. And also, why are they called the Thompson Twins? Because there's 3 of them, none of them are related, and none of them are named Thompson. I actually know the answer to that, I just wanted to make the joke. Anyway, so first up, weirdly enough, is not the Thompson Twins, it is Depeche Mode, which hopefully I pronounced that correctly. And I listened to their first album, Speak and Spell. Also, fun fact, Depeche Mode apparently comes from a French fashion magazine that they just stole the name from, and so it kind of translates loosely to Fashion Report, or something similar. But honestly, that's the most 80s sounding band ever, if you think about the translation. But let's stop talking about the name and start talking about the album. So Speak and Spell was basically, I think, came out in 1981, and it was basically firmly placing Depeche Mode into what was called New Wave, which was this new form of pop music that was coming out and used a lot of, if I understand correctly, synthesizers. It had it was a new style of music that people were really enjoying. And I listened to a little bit of it, and I definitely can hear how New Wave has affected a lot of bands I enjoy, how I'll hear the similarities in lyricism and just in instrumentation. And I'll kind of see how a lot of bands I enjoyed in the 2000s really had that influence when people were growing up in the 80s and making their own forms of music. And I think that's really interesting. So, really trying to think of how to describe the sound of Depeche Mode. Mostly, my first impression of it was a little bit of culture shock, because my only real exposure to Depeche Mode was pretty much Personal Jesus. Their biggest single. Well, they also had a top hit single in 1985 that I can't remember the name of, but basically it was one of their biggest hits. Everyone loved it. It's great, and I love Personal Jesus. I think it's fun. It's sexy. It's bold. It just has a great personality as a song. And it's it's good makeout music, let's be honest, sweetie. You listen to that, it's a little frisky. And so, I'm expecting something that's, a little, nice like that. You're just deep vocals, just bitch and bass line. And so I pop it on, and it's a lot lighter than I was expecting. It's, we're trying to think about it. It's definitely pop music. I know a lot of people, question whether Depeche Mode is pop, but it definitely is pop music. New Wave was very firmly a pop genre. And so it has this very light, melody to it. It's melodic, but also uses a lot of synthesizers, which gives it a very interesting quality. And I'm not describing the sound well at all in the slightest. Best sort of comparison, and I dislike comparing older bands just because I feel like if there is a level of influence, it's the other way around. But if I was going to give you like a comparison, if you're not like that familiar with like 80s or new wave, probably Lemon Demon. He has a similar sort of electronic pop medley that has it was reminiscent of sort of Depeche Mode sound. Though there are obviously differences in style. For instance, Lemon Demon is more, I feel, chiptune than synth pop, but that's neither here nor there. So if I'm gonna rate the album Speak and Spell, I liked it. I'm gonna say 6 out of 10. It wasn't my favorite, and it wasn't the sort of sound I loved from Personal Jesus, which, yeah, that's kind of an unfair comparison considering that the album that Personal Jesus was on was in the 90s, which was a decade after they made their first album, so they had 10 years to develop their sound. But it wasn't my absolute favorite, though I did enjoy a few songs from it. If I'm going to give you 2 song recommendations from the album, it would be Photograph, or Photograph, I can't remember exactly, and Tour, which I do love a nice history mem. Next up, we are talking about the Thompson Twins. Now you're wondering, Ryan, why are they called the Thompson Twins? Like we said, print that on a t-shirt. Well, it's actually quite interesting. So in the European, that's closest I'm going to get to guessing who wrote it, comic book series, The Adventures of Tintin, there are these 2 bumbling detectives called Thompson and Thompson, or however you pronounce those names. And so, basically, and everyone was just like, oh yeah, it's the Thompson Twins, but they aren't even related because they have different last names. And so they see this and they're just like, haha, that's a funny joke. And now it's a cool band name. So, Thompson Twins are also what would be considered new wave. And I listened to them, and instantly, first song I listened to, I think it was When I See You, but do not quote me on that. It was fantastic. I love the instrumentation where Depeche Mode was very synthesizer and vocals. They had a lot more of, your standard, 3-person rock band, instrumentation. They had the drums, they had the rhythm guitar, they had, the bass. And so they played that, just all that really nice technical instrumentation over just some really fun pop lyrics. And so this stuff is definitely the style that I enjoy listening to. As I mentioned before, I love Dark Cabernet, and some of the stuff that I really love about it is really fun instrumentation and lyricism, and just sort of that kind of wacky, just very unique sounds that you get from it. That is not supposed to be completely relatable or palatable. It has this unique quality to it that is part of the character of the music. If I'm trying to describe the sound, I would probably recommend think about the Bookbinder sisters. They use a lot of circus and cabaret style instrumentation to really give that sort of style to it. The reason why I'm talking about stuff like that is for instance, they have a song on the album called Slave Trade, which uses a lot of call and response and different percussion instruments that really give it this, I guess, more world music feel. I'm not really sure how to describe the song itself that well. So, I really enjoyed the Thompson Twins. They were very stylistic, which I enjoyed. And they just had some really, I just loved a lot of the stuff from the album. They reminded, the sound reminded me a lot of British rock that I enjoyed listening to. Obviously, 2000s British rock, the stuff that I listen to is very different from new wave. But I sort of had, there was a similar feel to it. Most notably, I definitely got a bit of a Wombats vibe. So, I don't know if the Wombats enjoyed listening to the Thompson Twins. I don't know if that was one of the influences for them. But I definitely had a very reminiscent, thing between them. And I really enjoyed the Thompson Twins' album, which I have not mentioned yet. It is a product of participation. And I thought it was like, I really enjoyed it. If I'm going to recommend 2 songs from that, it's going to be When I See You and Perfect Game. And I definitely like Perfect Game because there was a lot. It's like kind of like, that one like slow song they put on the album where everything's like a bit more high energy, and then they just like be like, wait a second, sweetheart, I have range. And then they just like play this like really nice like slow song, and it's like super pretty. Like think Ocean Eyes by Billie Eilish on like, her When We Sleep, Where Do We Go? I think that's the name of her album. Like kind of like that type of thing where they have like, a couple slow, really like, beautiful songs that just really contrast to more high energies. Fun stuff. I love like, when albums have that range to them. So, third album is, I kind of got sick by pop music at that point. I love pop music. Give me some Tessa Violet. Give me some Melanie Martinez, I guess. I don't listen to like a lot of like radio pop, so I was like, okay, this is enough. Besides my obsession with like pop music from the 80s, one thing that I like to do, because I'm like tee-hee, hashtag not like other girls, is I like to listen to like a lot of goth shit, because like I said, Dog Cabernet is when goth kids listen to too much punk, to like too much folk music. And so, I've enjoyed like, some of my, I never really got into Susie and the Banshees, if I'm being honest, but it's like, you play some Joy Division, you play some like Bajas, and I'm just like, Bela Lugosi really is dead, and this shit slaps. And so, like, I was, like, trying to, like, think of a band that was really similar to that sort of style that I've heard. And, I realize this is punk music and not goth, which, if we're splitting hairs, goth is a subdivision of punk, but I basically was trying to listen to something that was very similar to the style that was in the Ballywick, in the Ballhouse. Ballhouse? Wheelhouse? Ballpark, there we go. Sorry, guys. And so I just picked The Cure, because I'd heard of The Cure, and I'm just like, The Cure sounds edgy and therefore fun. Also, whenever I think of punk music, I mostly just imagine Edward Scissorhands like playing a guitar, and I don't know how that would work. Cause scissors. And so, for The Cure, I listened to their debut album, and I cheated a little. This came out in 1979, so I'm a fake, like, music listener or something. And that was Three Imaginary Boys. And so I really enjoyed it. It was, there's a lot more songs than on the other 2 albums. I think the shortest album from this, listening period was Thompson Twins' A Product of Participation, which was, 10 tracks. I think Depeche Mode had, around 12. Three Imaginary Boys, I think, had 15 or 16, but do not quote me on that. A lot of them were a lot shorter. They were all around, 3 minutes. So, shorter tracks. And I actually really enjoyed it. One thing that I always am, a little bit surprised when it comes to punk music is it's always a lot lighter than I'm expecting. I always imagine, punk to be a very heavy band. Because, but I often, I might be confused that with, other genres which are, really heavy, metal and other stuff. But punk is, it simply was supposed to be, cross-cultural. It had, it could have, really aggressive lyrics, but not everything that, punk music made had to be, super edgy or super, hard. Just even metal music does not have to be the most edgiest, hard thing ever. There can be some very beautiful melodic metal songs out there. And so I actually really enjoyed it. It has really great instrumentation. It has very fun lyricism. And that's the one thing I love in bands is lyricism. And so I was listening to a few songs, and the lyrics were actually really nice. They were interesting, they were catchy, and they played around a lot with a lot of the sort of poetic elements that you have in language. And so I always love when musicians know how to write lyrics. Especially since, as a musician, I can't write lyrics. I'm shit at it, so I'm just that's hot. So, I'm trying to think of anything I can really say more about the album, because it's really hard to describe the sound, and mostly just because I don't listen to a lot of punk music. and so I don't have a good way of comparing it. So, mostly I'm just gonna kind of skip past the description, skip past all of the things. I really like the album. I found it enjoyable. I'm not gonna say it's my favorite album of all time now. I'm not gonna say I'm a complete obsessed with punk rock. Because I like punk rock. I like a lot of genres, but it's not my favorite. And I'm just going to give you my recommendations. If you're going to listen to the album, which you should listen to all of these albums because I want to hear about what you thought about them. I recommend the song Three Imaginary Boys, which the album's named after, so you should always listen to the eponymous, songs of an album because it's important. And Grinding Halt, which I thought was really fun just from a lyric perspective, and also was oddly reminiscent of our current situation, because there ain't no people, everything's come to a grinding halt, and I'm just narrative parallelism. That's sexy. Anyway, guys, so that was my exploration of 3 bands from the 80s that I just never heard before, and I really want to get down and dirty and kind of check them out. And I thought I had a fun time. If I'm being honest, New Wave is probably not my favorite thing in the world. And I enjoy, punk music for the most part. But it was really fun to explore and just try a genre that I hadn't, really listened to before. And I think that's always really great when you're listening to music. Because even if you don't really get a lot from an album, one time I listened to, The Voices of Watt, or The Watt Street Prophets, or whatever the album is called. And it was really interesting. And, I thought there's a lot of cool stuff, but I also, there wasn't a lot that I took away from it besides just, I guess, the cultural significance of what the album meant. It was more of something that I was listening to because I knew it was important and I wanted to see, why. But I think it's always fun to, try listening to, something that you've never tried before or a genre that you're not sure if you like, because a lot of the times it can really surprise you. And it's also just, fun to explore other things. And the more you listen to, the more you can kind of, have a better way to describe the bands you like. Or you can better understand, why they sound the way they do because you've heard sort of their progenitors and what's inspired them to make music. And every time you do it, you just find something out that's, really cool. Before I listened to this band and I did, a little bit of research, I never knew that Johnny Cash wrote a cover of, well, he didn't write it as a cover, made a cover of Personal Jesus, or that Marilyn Manson did, and I'm thinking, that's kind of crazy, because I love covers, and I like both of those artists. And so, I think it's really great that we can, have that time and listen to music and just enjoy ourselves. Anyway, guys, I want you to let me know what you thought about these 3 bands, or the 3 albums I mentioned, and I'm just going to break them down for you again. Speak and Spell by Depeche Mode, A Product of Participation by the Thompson Twins, and Three Imaginary Boys by The Cure. And, just let me know, do you like them? What's another band you would suggest for me to listen to? Because I always want to put something in my ear holes. And, yeah, that's pretty much it. Remember, you can always like my videos because that lets me know how I'm doing, and it lets YouTube know that I'm a bad bitch that needs all the love and affection. You can always comment, and we just talked about that. And, of course, you can share this video with, your friends or people you don't like. Because, basically, if you have a friend out there that wants to listen to some guy from Medford, Oregon, rant on about 80s new wave music for, 20 minutes, I'm your bitch. Have you seen me? They need to see this face, okay? Anyway, guys, like always, I had so much fun today. I want you to have fun today and to stay safe. And this is going to be Falsebooles123, and I'm signing off.